So the new trend in most frontier AI labs is to have their models do deep research. And there's this library uh, that comes from an open source project that actually allows any open source model uh, to do exactly what deep research does. So the thing is, this library initially only supported OpenAI models, but recently they've upgraded so you can use any open source model, right? So let's get to it. Here are the pip libraries that I used with the versions in case you want to run this in the future. But as of February 2025, if you just do a regular pip install, it will most likely pull these versions here. So we start by doing these pip installs. GPT Researcher. This is something that is required in case you want to run this on a Google Colab. LangChain Groq. We're going to be using the models that are hosted in Groq. You're going to need Duckduckgo search, uh, which is a free search library. LangChain Hugging Face, because we're going to need some embedding models from there, and sentence transformers. So we start by doing the imports. And this line is, like I said, just required if you want to run this procedure in a Google Colab. Then we start by defining the research topic. And as input, I'm going to have a string, the Groq, your Groq API key. And if you want to use Tavily for more thorough searches, you can you can insert your Tavily key here. But in this version, which is everything is completely free, I'm using DuckDuckGo as a default. So we start by setting up some environment variables. Um, it's gonna get the Groq and Tavily key from your function parameters, and then it's going to set those variables. And then here we have three different types of LLMs. It uses a fast LLM, like for summarization and those kinds of tests. Um, you have a smart LLM that's done for like tests that involve some rationale, and then you have your strategic LLM, and that's the LLM that's going to do um, the planning of the search. Okay, um, I'm using um, the Groq 3.3 70B spec deck. Um, Actually, I like the 70B versatile a little better. The answers are a little better, but for some reason, the number of tokens that are allowed into this model are a little shorter than the spec deck. So to be able to get a little longer researches, I'm using this spec deck model. And um, I commented here some other models that you can use in Groq, right? Uh, and all these variables are variables that you can set to define how the how deep the research will go and like what kind of search engine it will use and all those kinds of things. And you can on this link here, there's a detailed description of all these variables that you can set. Okay, you can see they're all here. So um, To be able to use everything for free, Grok has a 6,000 character limit as an input. So these are the parameters that I found that actually can do some research without getting rate limits from Grok. I had to reduce this from 8,192 to 4,000. Um, I increased this a little bit for the summary. You do have to set this OpenAI key to dummy so that it won't error because it's using the OpenAI library. So it searches if you if you don't put a dummy key or some kind of key there, it will error. So important to put some kind of value for this OpenAI API key. So another important parameter is this. This is the scraper you're going to use. I'm using Beautiful Soup, but it has some other interesting options there that you can look on that config parameter page. Um, you can set the report format. Um, I'm using Harvard style. Kind of like that one the best since I do want this more research focus. Um, Max iterations is the maximum number of iterations for processes like query expansion or search refinement. The default is three. Like I had to change to one because, like I said, otherwise the research comes out too long, and you're gonna get rate limits on Grok. Same here. This is like your subtopic exploration. So if in a paper, if it finds other references, it will actually um, search some of those links that it finds, and this is how you control that depth, right, on the max subtopics. Again, I had to put this to one to avoid Grok's rate limits. And you can even set like a role of an agent, so you can say you're a specialist on medicine. Um, I want you to do the research on this topic. Focus on such and such expertise, right? So this block actually calls the GPT researcher library with your query. And finally, down here, we just do some replacements to make the markdown look nicer. So it returns a markdown coded report, right? Call the function. Yeah, you need to load this library so we can display the report in markdown format. And then we put our query and uh, just call the function that we just showed above, right? With the query and the keys and the needed keys. One interesting thing is that you can't actually limit the number of articles uh, that the agent is going to research. Uh, these variables here actually there isn't one for that, but I found out that if you just put it in the instructions for your query, something like start defining, limit your search to the top two articles. So you can just put it in the instructions, some kind of limiting factor of the number of articles that you want the output answer to have. So we can see here the question I asked is a fairly complex and recent topic. Is what are the latest advancements in semantic RAG? Start by defining semantic RAG, and please limit your search to the top two articles. And we can see here that you know it first does the planning, starting the research task for what are the latest advancements in semantic RAG. Start by defining uh, RAG, etc., etc. And then AI research agent, browsing the web to learn more about what are the latest events in semantic RAG, and you can see that it plans and it starts finding uh, the added the URLs to add to the research, and then it actually does the research, scrapes the pages, um, and basically starts looking at like sub RLs and and does its own planning here. So then you start seeing the like mini summaries of each of the links, and you can see that it does something pretty extensive. And then it writes out the um, the research, with the markdown symbols, and then when you use this line here, display markdown report, it actually formats the research into markdown. And um, you can see that it does a pretty nice job. um, it explains what is semantic rag, the introduction, latest advancements, and it gives like I said, two I asked it to limit to two articles, so it gave me the references for those two articles. And if you open uh, the articles here, they're actually pretty meaningful and relevant articles. It's not like Bing, that sometimes Bing, I don't know if you've run across this, but sometimes Bing hallucinates references, where you click on the reference and it has nothing to do with it doesn't actually have the information that it says it's supposed to be there. So you can see the articles are pretty, in this case here, are pretty relevant. It's talking about different RAG technologies. And then the other article it picked, this one, it's also meaningful and pretty relevant. Um, so that was a first topic. I did another one. Just a question I had in my mind: did Nvidia stock drop because Trump announced tariffs or because of DeepSeek? Please limit your search to the top three articles. And the above one here is the case where I used the uh, the 7B versatile, and that could only handle two articles. And then later I found out that using that other model by Groq, the spec deck, you could actually fit three articles into the mix, right? So I did the same thing. It goes and it does a pretty, again, pretty thorough research. I mean, I'm passing here. You can pause and read through the logic here if you want. Again, a pretty thorough report research, and then it writes the report. It tells you the estimated cost. Um, I don't know, based. I mean, out of which, if it actually gets like Grok rates, or I didn't dig deep in how does it get this estimate. Um, so it writes the report and then formats it, and uh, the conclusion here. In conclusion, based on available information, it appears that the primary cause of NVIDIA's stock drop is the announcement of tariffs by Trump on Taiwanese semiconductor imports. While the emergence of DeepSeek is certainly a significant development in the AI market, it is unlikely to be the primary cause of Nvidia's stock drop. Investors should focus on the potential impact of the tariffs on Nvidia's production costs and profit margins rather than the emergence of new competitor in the A market. And it gives you the references here. So pretty nicely done. And again, by if you wanna pay for Tavily and maybe pay for a Groq account, um, you can then change those uh, variables to get deeper research. You can see that Groq has DeepSeek and also these the llamas are not that expensive, so you can pay a little bit of money and get rid of the rate limits. Well, anyway, if you wanna take a look at this output more closely and the code, I'm gonna put the link down in the description. Uh, it will link you to a PDF that has both the code and the sample output. All I ask is that you like the video and the article. It costs you nothing and it helps us understand if we're making useful content so we know which direction to head. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you and bye bye.